All right, this is Learning Target 4.5. This is solving using the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is something that will work for any quadratic equation as long as it's written in this general form, which you see up here is the ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So again, it has to be set equal to 0 first. Then we have these a, b, and c in here. Those are very important because whatever coefficients or constant you see in those places are the numbers that you're going to be plugging into this very complicated looking formula. It's not terribly difficult to use once you've got those numbers plugged in correctly. It just kind of takes some computation and some square rooting and things like that, but it's not terribly difficult to use. So for some of the examples on this page, I've already got them worked out just to make this a little bit faster and so that you don't have to watch 30 minutes of video here. But I'm going to work through the first one step by step with you and then just kind of talk through the others. And you can pause as needed to get caught up with writing things down if I go too fast. So number one, the first thing we need to do is identify what our a, b, and c are. So I'm looking right here. The coefficient of x squared is a. The coefficient of the x term or a linear term is b. And then the constant term is c. And I also highlighted the subtraction symbol there just to remind myself that that is actually going to be a negative 72 that I'm plugging in for c. That's a very common error, is to maybe plug in 72 instead of negative 72. So now I'm going to copy down this quadratic formula, except I'm going to replace all of these variables with the different values. So negative b in this case would be negative 6 plus or minus square root b squared, so this is 6 squared minus 4, and then a is 3, and c is negative 72. And then the fraction bar, 2, and then a is 3. So here's the initial setup, just plugging everything in. Now, I always want to kind of take care of everything under the square root first. This is called the discriminant, by the way, just a math vocab term there. So I'm always going to simplify the discriminant first, and then worry about everything else after that. So negative 6 plus or minus square root. Order of operations says do this first. So 6 squared would be 36 minus 4 times 3 times negative 72. That's going to end up being a positive 9, nope, not 900. It's going to end up, the whole thing will end up being 900, but this one's going to be, let's see, 864 over, and then you can go ahead and multiply those. That doesn't really matter what order you do that in, so it's going to be a 6. So then I have negative 6 plus or minus square root. Add those together, you get 900 over 6. Now this is going to split up into two different things because of the plus and the minus here, or this addition and subtraction. So this is going to become negative 6 plus 30 over 6, and then negative 6 minus 30 over 6. And these are going to be two different answers. So negative 6 plus 30 would be 24 over 6 would be 4. And negative 36 in the numerator divided by 6 would be negative 6. So my two answers, or the two roots, the two solutions, would be 4 and negative 6. Okay? So we can kind of follow the steps that I have for the rest of these, and I'll do those a little bit quicker. But I've identified my A, B, and C here, plugged them in. Again, In this case, b is negative. Don't forget that it's negative because of that subtraction, so I end up actually with a positive 4 there. Then inside the radical symbol, inside the discriminant, there's a -4 and a -80. It all ends up being positive. So we kind of follow along through the computation there, split it up into the two different addition and subtraction, and we get 5 and -4 as the solutions. Okay. What I would recommend right now is pause and get caught up on writing all of that down. If you feel comfortable, if you feel confident enough, try numbers 3 and 4 on your own and then resume the video to kind of see how you did. Otherwise, if you just want to see them first and then copy them down later, whatever works best for you, I'm going to start explaining these here in just a second. So pause if you need to. Otherwise, we're ready to move on. So here are 3 and 4. Number 3 is fairly straightforward compared to or in line with the other two. So I've identified the A, B, and C here. A and B are both positive. C is negative. We end up with 100 under the square root symbol. So we've got our two different cases, and we've got solutions of 1 and -4. Okay. Number 4, there's one thing that I want to highlight that makes this problem a lot easier. So one thing I notice when I read this, 3x squared plus 3x minus 126, if I'm thinking ahead a little bit, that -126 for C is going to not necessarily be challenging, but it's just going to be a really big number once I multiply it by 4 and by 3 on the inside here. So one thing you can sometimes do to simplify the whole process straight from the beginning is find a common divisor or a common factor between A, B, and C. So in this case, A is 3, B is 3, and C is -126. I can divide all of those by 3 and simplify this quadratic down to just x squared plus x minus 42. And then my numbers are a lot smaller and easier to work with. So that's the first step, is I'm dividing everything by 3, making the quadratic simpler, a little bit smaller numbers, and then plugging in the A, B, and C. You'll get the same answers either way. This just maybe saves you a little bit of computation work. So I plug those in. I get down to -1 plus or minus square root of 169. Which is a perfect square. It's just 13, so that's easy. Divided by 2 and split it up into the two cases, I get 6 and -7. All right. Hopefully that's helpful. If you have any questions, email me. If you want to see any more examples, email me and I'll get that sent along to you.